With Sam Darnold moving out of San Francisco, the Niners needed to add a quality backup for Brock Purdy. Their choice? Josh Dobbs, a journeyman quarterback coming off a career year. Last year with the Vikings and Cardinals, for instance, he picked up nearly 2,500 yards through the air and 13 touchdowns. He also showed off what a great athlete he is by amassing 421 yards through the ground, and 6 touchdowns go alongside that. Outside of the football field, Dobbs continues to impress. He spent time as an aerospace engineer, which included a stint at NASA. He's also found his own charity, Extraordinary Dobbs Foundation, in which he advocates for alopecia alongside other diseases. To say that Joshua Dobbs' career and life up to this point has been fruitful would be an understatement. So in this video, I wanted to dive deeper into the player and person Joshua Dobbs is and what San Francisco is getting. Born Stephanie and Robert Dobbs on January 26, 1995 in Alapera, Georgia, Josh Dobbs had an upper middle class upbringing, with his dad being a senior vice president for Wells Fargo and his mom working for UPS as a regional HR manager. These luxuries allowed Joshua Dobbs to pursue his passion early on in life, where he started football at the age of 5. While Dobbs was excelling on the football field, his next life passion presented itself, but more so as a struggle. Going from elementary school to middle school, Dobbs started losing hair due to a rare autoimmune disease, alopecia. Unsurprisingly, during this time period, Dobbs felt extremely insecure and isolated, but later on in his life, he was able to turn those feelings into hope, not just for himself, but others, with the establishment of the Extraordinary Dobbs Foundation. And while Dobbs Foundation is a blessing, he truly became known on the football field. In high school, he played for Alapera High School, and as a senior, he threw for 3,625 yards and 29 touchdowns. During his time with the Raiders, Dobbs was an absolute nightmare to defend. Regardless of what you took away from him, let's say you're trying to go heavy on pass coverage, then he would burn you with his legs. But if you took away his run lanes, then he had no problem just dicing up your defense. And I wasn't the only one to notice Dobbs' dominance on the football field. According to 24/7 Sports, he was ranked as a 4-star recruit and had offers from ASU, Arkansas, Boston College, Duke, and University of Tennessee. Ultimately, Joshua Dobbs did decide University of Tennessee over these other options. As a true freshman for Tennessee in 2013, Dobbs played in 5 games with 4 starts after the starter was injured. On the year, he had nearly 700 yards, 2 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He also had nearly 200 yards on the ground. As a sophomore in 2014, Dobbs played in 6 games after leading starters Worley and Peterman once again. On the year though, he saw an improvement as a passer, throwing for nearly 1,200 yards with 9 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Dobbs also continued to develop as a dual threat quarterback, amassing 469 yards through the ground and 8 touchdowns. 2015 is the first year Dobbs would have the opportunity to start, and he started in all 13 games and picked up 2,291 yards and 15 touchdowns alongside 5 interceptions through the air. He continued his ungodly production on the ground, putting up 671 yards to 12 touchdowns on the year. For Dobbs' senior season, he did not disappoint in the least. He threw for 2,946 yards, 27 touchdowns to only 12 interceptions. He also ran for 831 yards and 13 more touchdowns on this year. Overall, when I watched Dobbs across his career at Tennessee, I saw a quarterback that was able to become more refined both through the air and ground. But perhaps the most insane thing to me is he did this all while maintaining a 4.0 GPA in aerospace engineering. So with Dobbs absolutely killing it in the classroom and field across his 4 years at Tennessee, he decided to enter the 2017 NFL Draft. And at the combine, Dobbs came in at 6'3", weighing 216 pounds. He ran his 40-yard dash in 4.64 seconds and his 10-yard split in a blistering fast 1.56 seconds. After this performance, scouts decided to dive a little bit deeper into Josh Dobbs as a player, and they saw strengths as well as weaknesses. When looking at Dobbs' strengths, for instance, they saw a quarterback with prototypical NFL size and athleticism. They were also extremely impressed by his deep ball accuracy. Unsurprisingly perhaps, Dobbs also showed off his smarts on the football field, where he often would make it through his progressions, finding the third or fourth target on a play. But even when Dobbs didn't find a target, he was able to take off and showed great explosion that could make him a real asset in the NFL. But it wasn't just sunshine and rainbows. For weaknesses, Dobbs needed to improve his accuracy more. He would also throw on the Superman cape just a little bit too much at University of Tennessee, which would cause errors like interceptions. Overall, when scouts were looking at Dobbs, they saw a prospect with starting level caliber, and he was considered a round 2 or 3 pick. So it was a surprise when the Steelers were able to grab Joshua Dobbs in round 4 with pick 28 of the 2017 NFL Draft. Dobbs over the next few years would see time with the Steelers, Jaguars, Steelers again, Browns, Lions, Titans, Browns once again, Cardinals, and Vikings. So in 5 years, from 2018 to 2023, Dobbs has played with 7 teams and had to learn 7 completely different offenses, including learning the offense for the Vikings last year mid-game. But learning all these offenses apparently wasn't too hard of a challenge for Dobbs, because he was also able to complete his NASA internship at Kennedy Space Center during his time with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So while I'm sure Dobbs will be launching rocket ships alongside Elon Musk in no time, I want to focus on his most recent year in 2023, where we got to see our first extended glimpse of Joshua Dobbs as a starting NFL quarterback. Initially, I want to examine Joshua Dobbs as a passer, so here we're going to focus on how he carries over his deep throw accuracy from college. Here, he notices Ambry Thomas gets burned and he releases it immediately, and you couldn't have placed this in a better spot. Luckily for San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan, Joshua Dobbs is extremely efficient at play action. Take this play where he draws the defense over thanks to his athleticism and then flips his hips back open once he notices the wide receiver running free. This is a great play, and while many will just say it's all concept, I think it really starts because of Joshua Dobbs' athleticism. Since coming out of college, I also think Joshua Dobbs has improved his accuracy, like on this play, how he's able to fit it between 2 San Francisco defenders for the touchdown. Perhaps the hardest thing in play action is turning your back to the defense, and on this play against the Cowboys, Dobbs has to do just that to only have Micah Parsons right in his face. But in a similar way to Purdy, I think he does a great job of keeping his eyes down the field and taking the big shot. Outside of Dobbs' play action game, I think his deep ball is just beautiful. Here, for instance, it looks like the corner has pretty sticky coverage, but thanks to a perfectly placed ball, it's a completion. But arm strength and play action isn't enough for a quarterback. Timing and anticipation are also vital, and on this play, as soon as Joshua Dobbs is hitting his back foot and this wide receiver is coming out of his break, the ball's coming out. The most impressive part to me though is Joshua Dobbs was able to do this with 2 separate sets of wide receivers. Now as the Vikings, he does the same thing on this out pattern. Overall in the year, I was pretty impressed how Joshua Dobbs was able to learn 2 separate offenses and operate them at a pretty high level at times. Here, for instance, I think Joshua Dobbs does a nice job of coming off his first and second read to then find his check down man over the middle. In a similar way on this play, I want to focus on how Josh Dobbs looks towards the bottom of the screen. He's reading these 2 wide receivers, notices they're covered up, so then he comes back to the middle of the field and has a perfectly placed ball, which allows this wide receiver to run for maximum yardage. Outside of the passing game, Joshua Dobbs' reads really help him in the running game. Here, for instance, running a zone read, he can tell Micah Parsons slams too hard on his running back, so he pulls it, and then the rest is history thanks to his athletic profile. He's just rumbling down the field. Now, moving back to his play action game, we get to see how Joshua Dobbs is deadly in this aspect, not through the air but ground. Here, for instance, he can't really see anyone open, so he just decides to take off and picks up a pretty nice gain. In a similar way to Brock Purdy, I don't necessarily think Joshua Dobbs is trying to run it every single time, but he shows off great escapability when pressure does get in his face, and on this play on 3rd and 10, he does just enough to get 11 yards to keep this drive moving. Outside of all of these positives for Joshua Dobbs though, there was still a major issue that carried over from his college days, and that was him trying to do too much. On a play like this, for example, I want to focus on how Joshua Dobbs has an open checkdown man, but rather than going to him, he tries to scramble in hopes of making a bigger play. But he really should have just gone with his checkdown in this instance. In a similar way, I think on this play, Joshua Dobbs left the pocket a little bit too soon. But now moving over to San Francisco, I think Joshua Dobbs enters the perfect scenario. He's going to work with Brian Griese, who helped Brock Purdy work out some of his mistakes. So in a similar way, I think that he could work out some of Joshua Dobbs' mistake, like rolling out of the pocket a little bit too soon. Overall, I think San Francisco did a great job of signing Joshua Dobbs to a cheap contract, and that should allow him to spend in other areas of need, such as offensive line or re-signing Brandon Ayuk. But ultimately, these are just my thoughts on San Francisco's new backup quarterback, and I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed, and as always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.